Good afternoon. Um, my most recent research is focusing on how we understand Black women's political ambition. And so I am pushing back against what our literature says because we are missing a key component of why and how Black women engage, and it is community. And so my research is answering the question how they engage, but what I am finding is that many of the Black women that I have talked to across the country, they are very deliberate about their commitment to community and how they work through and in community. And so that leads me to my talk today, my brief talk today about Black women and with this idea of strolling to the polls. This is a picture that posted just a few days ago, and it literally broke the internet. It actually received national attention. It was discussed on The View, I believe it was yesterday. And it's a picture of Black women who are members of historically Black sororities, Alpha Kappa Alpha, Delta Sigma Theta, Zeta Phi Beta, and Sigma Gamma Rho. And they're in their colors, they're in their pearls and pumps, and they also have on their shirts, stroll to the polls. And so I thought that was a great picture to show, to kind of speak to what I want to talk about today, particularly Black women in this moment, organizing through within the community and through their organizations. This picture is very powerful because when we look at these organizations, particularly just these four, we're talking about organizations that have over 800,000 members worldwide and actually over 3,000 chapters worldwide. Next slide. So my research has shown that with Black women in political engagement, what we see is that Black women function and engage with a collective purpose through collective action. Historically, we have seen this with the Black Women's Club movement. We see this with environmental justice issues in Michigan. We saw this with movement and organization around Flint. And then also prior to Flint in Detroit, we saw Black women in the suburbs of Detroit organizing around exorbitant bills when it came to accessing water. So they had very extremely high water bills in the suburbs of Detroit. So we see even around environmental justice, these women are organizing. And we see many other examples historically and even now of how Black women attempt to address issues. It is together in a collective. Also, Black women have a significant amount of social capital within their communities. They have respect and they are expected to do. In some of the interviews I conducted, one of the groups that I conducted, there are three women that recently were elected to city council in Reynoldsburg, Ohio. And they had a relationship with each other. They were football moms. Their sons played football. They knew each other through all these different activities that they were doing, and they were known within their communities. And so when they decided to run for office, one decided first, and she pulled the other ones in, but they had a connection, not just only with what they were doing with the community, but just their relationships that they had with Black women and other people that gave them a name recognition that allowed them to move forward and be successful in winning elections. Also, one of the things that we're constantly hearing this term that Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. And that is true, but I think when we say that, we have to be clear that we're not just talking about voting. Black women, they are the strongest and most consistent voting bloc in the Democratic Party. And my colleague, Dr. Frazier, is going to talk about that in a few minutes. But what we see is that it's also the organizing their strength really is in not just only their individual vote, but what they do within the community to get others vote, as well as educated about civic engagement in politics. And the Democratic Party has become extremely dependent on this labor. When we teach about Black politics and Black political engagement, we have talked about Black candidates working and running outside of the Democratic Party, meaning that they have tapped into resources within the community without the Democratic Party's support. Well, now what we're seeing is that Democratic Party has become dependent on this work. Just a few weeks ago, the DNC chair, Tom Perez, was on Meet the Press, and he was discussing the Republican Party strategy of litigating against absentee ballots and other issues concerning the election. He was asked what was the Democrats' response going to be? Were they going to also pursue a strategy of litigation? His response was that the Democratic Party had an apparatus of people that were mobilized to respond. He never said that they were going to sue, but that he was dependent on this group of people that were going to be in response. So I want to talk about who he was talking about and who the party is dependent on right now. Next. It's Black women. So just a few weeks ago over the summer, prior to Senator Harris being named as VP, VP choice, there was this call for Win with Black women, in which Black women were arguing that the choice needed to be a Black woman, and that Black women had been laboring, and that this was a moment that that labor had to be recognized. And that labor, as I said, doesn't just include voting, it is the organizing. And so we have women such as Latasha Brown with her organization Black Voter Matters, Stacey Abrams with Fair Fight, and then Melanie Campbell with Black Women's Roundtable, which is a part of the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation. And these women and these organizations, and there are others like these, but these are the most prominent in the sense that what they are doing is that they work beyond the election day. They are tilling the ground in which they are doing voter education. They are providing resources to communities about public policy implementation, voter protection. And so they are working year round. And so that when we get to a general election, it is really just, they are actually just amping up what they have continually done consistently over the years. Next slide. So I just want to get back to the Divine Nine here. One of the other areas that we see Black women organizing is in how they're mobilizing their members. Just a few weeks ago, actually it was 2 weeks ago, the OWN network has a major campaign around voting, and particularly mobilizing Black women, Own Your Vote. And they hosted a program that was co-sponsored with NAACP and other organizations. And in that program, many of you may have watched that program, the leaders of the Divine Nine, as well as Links Incorporated and the National Council of Negro Women, all were on, and they were talking about the work that their organizations were doing to get out the vote, but also to protect the vote. And so some of the key things that they were doing that was across all the organizations were that they were mobilizing members to be poll workers. They were encouraging members who were attorneys to volunteer to be poll monitors, and they were partnering with larger organizations to do work, particularly around voter education and voter protection. Next slide. And so the organizations that they are partnering with includes When We All Vote, the Campus Vote Project, Election Protection, the NAACP, and Rock the Vote. And so these groups are really, as what Tom Perez talked about, this is the apparatus. This is the labor that the Democratic Party will be dependent upon on the day of the election. Next slide. So, in closing, when we talk about these women and their organizations, their power and action, what we see prior to the election is that they are critical in providing voter education for their members and for the community. And they're doing an amazing job of doing this, even within a pandemic. Voter registration, we have many of the due dates for voter registration are this week. And so you will see on social media, a lot of these organizations have pushed a lot about voter registration in many of these states. Voter mobilization, encouraging people to vote, but also educating people. There's been a lot of push around informing people of how to correctly fill out an absentee ballot, making sure that they follow the deadlines. So a lot of voter education of members as well as community. And then on the election day, they are going to be critical. They will be doing the on the ground reporting. So while the NAACP, LDF, and ACLU and others will be filing the lawsuits, they will be the persons that will be reporting when there are incidents that are attempted to prevent people from voting. Also, the poll workers. As we know, with this pandemic, a significant number of poll workers tend to be seniors. And so these women and through their organizations have sought to fill the gap to ensure that polling stations are well staffed, so that will allow for people to actually have their vote counted that day. Also, supporting legal efforts. Supporting legal, many of these women are professional women that are in the legal profession, so they will also be actively engaged in many of the litigation that we can expect to come following election day. And so I'm going to stop there, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation about what we see with these women and the impact that they are having and will have in a few weeks. Thank you.